Welcome to South Texas Youth Soccer's webinar series. I'm Gareth Glick. Today we're excited to be welcoming the head coach of the Houston Dynamo, Tab Ramos. Tab was born in Uruguay, moved to the United States at the age of 11. After a high school career in which he set high school records and was the high school player of the year, he attended North Carolina State, was a three-time All-American. After that, graduation, he embarked on a professional soccer career that saw him play in Spain, Mexico, the United States, one of the original members of the MLS in the New York Metro Stars. During his time as a player, Tab represented the United States, earning 81 caps, playing in the World Cup in 1990, 94, and 98, as well as in the Olympics in 1988. Upon retirement, Tab began a career in coaching at the youth club level and has gone on to work with the U.S. men's national team at multiple World Cups, both under 20 and the full senior level. He's also been with the youth technical director for U.S. Soccer before leaving that post to join the Houston Dynamo in 2019. Today, Tab's going to walk us through his journey through the coaching pathway. He's going to provide us with an insight into how those experiences have shaped him as a coach. We're super excited to listen to what he has to present. Tab, welcome to the webinar. Thank you for taking the time to share your story today.
Hi, thank you for having me on.
Awesome. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started and kind of go through each of these presentation slides that you've laid out. And first of all, I give just an oversight of kind of where Tab has been and what he's done, starting all the way back in his coaching career in 2001 when he first took his first coaching license. And he's going to walk us through each of these steps as being a youth coach, working with players and U8 and U10 and development academy, all the way through national teams and into the professional game where he is now with Houston Dynamo. So this is kind of an oversight of what the last 18 years has looked like for Tab as a coach and some of the players that he's worked with, and I'm sure he'll touch base on some of these as we go through. So Tab, if it's okay with you, let's start with kind of your coaching education pathway, and if you can kind of walk us through what that coaching education pathway looked like for you and some of the high points along that way and things that have shaped you as a coach today.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm really excited to be speaking about fully about coaching. You know, a lot of the times, when I get asked into, interviews and discuss my coaching career, it always begins with me describing everything I did as a player and the teams I played on and all that stuff. And I'm so much more interested in speaking about coaching than I am about, a playing career that was so long ago, that I could barely remember, to be honest. So, to be fair, when I took my F license, I just did it I started to help out with my son, like most people do it, like every other parent, you try to help out with your son's team. There was a coach on my son's team who had never coached or played before. And I just took my son down to the township tryout like everybody else. And he made this team, and the coach had never played or anything like that. And at one point, after going to watch for a month, he asked me if I could help. And in order for me to help, I needed to have a license to be on the sideline. And so I went and took my F license. That was the beginning of my coaching education, because it is helpful. You do learn a few tips in your F license. And I got on the sideline, and it was as simple as that. A few years later, about a year and a half later, when I retired from playing, I went and took my B license, and that was the first time for me where I actually thought, wow, I had been a player for so many years, and I really feel like I didn't know anything about the game. I didn't know about the specifics of the game, to teach it, how to scout, how to think about the other team really that much, how to take advantage of opportunities of the other team. These are all things that sort of, for me, helped me to realize that there's so much more to the game that I knew as a player. As a player, I think I played more by instinct. I listened to my coaches, but I didn't understand the why I was doing what I was doing. And taking the B license really helped me to get on, to love the game. I didn't think when I was playing that I would become a coach. And by taking the courses, it helped me to love the game. So from the moment I took my B license, I went to all of the coaches conventions. I tried to listen in to everybody that had something that I believe was interesting. and I went to coaching seminars. I went to a bunch of things throughout the world, fortunately represented the US in 2006 after the FIFA World Cup. I think Bruce Arena at the time had just gotten fired, so we didn't have a head coach. And fortunately, Sunil Gulati called me and he said, well, we need somebody to go to, I think it was Germany at the time. I think it was after the Germany World Cup. And I went over there and did the FIFA symposium, and I was like, wow, this is great, being at this level, and everybody's so much into, coaching and learning and being in that type of environment of catching the new trends of how the game should be played and, all these things. And it was like, I almost couldn't get enough. So I spent the time really between 2004 and about 2009, 2010, where I barely saw any MLS games. Like I might've seen 3 or 4 MLS games. I was just all into coaching, and I would watch what everybody else watches, the EPL, the La Liga best games, Barcelona, Madrid. And, I was just focused basically only on coaching. Because as all the people that you have on here and that will hopefully listen to this, going through, youth coaching is, I think, a really difficult pathway. It requires a lot of time to be a good coach in the youth. It requires the thick skin of, dealing with parents who really don't understand, but who have an opinion. And because they are, at the end of the day, customers, because they pay for their children to play, of course they should be heard. And it's almost like you're a teacher in school. Parents want to know, my son's learning this, why? What can I do? What can I do better? I'm sorry, because I'm getting a call. I just put that away.
You're right.
What can I do? What can I do better? What can he do better? All those things. And those, as everybody on here knows, require tons of time. And, fortunately, I went through all that time. I finally got my A license in 2007. A friend of mine who lives in Colorado now, he and I were talking. We both had B licenses. We're like, why don't we take it together? We took it together up in, I think it was Massachusetts or Connecticut. And we went and took the A license for the week, where you have to stay over and do the whole thing. And I really loved it. I love the A license. It was a little bit more freedom in the A license to now, give a little bit more. It wasn't so much instruction like the B. Now I could give my own opinion, and I could develop things, because you watch someone else coach. It doesn't mean that you knowing how to coach now means that you can copy someone else. Yeah. Because actually in coaching, no one is really wrong. We all really have our different opinions on how to coach. I think it's important to watch someone else, and that gives you ideas of, say you watch Chelsea or you watch, Arsenal, and you're like, oh, they do some nice training sessions, but they don't necessarily apply to you, but you can use some of those ideas to say, hey, with my team and the guys I have, I can do this, and so I think the A license opened me up to a little bit more, not be so rigid to learning from someone else and applying what someone else is doing to what I'm doing, but to have the freedom to say, okay, now I've watched someone else coach, but I think this, I'm going to do this because I think differently. And so the A license was that next pathway. And then you have to inevitably, at the same time as you go from license to license, you have to be working at it. I was coaching at the time. I think I had 2 teams by then. By the time I was coaching by the time 2007, 2008 rolled around. So you know how difficult that is. You come in, at 6:30 or 6:45 to try to set up for 7 because someone else is using the field. So, so you have to set it up and make sure that your setup is such that you don't have to move cones around. You just have to take some up as you go into the next thing, as everybody knows. But I'm giving the example that this is the norm. Like everybody is doing this. And so you set it up, and then I had another team come in at 8. So if my first session was 7 to 8:30, my next session was 8:30 to 10. And so you have the team warming up at the time that you're putting back cones because you're doing a similar session with the other team. So it requires so much planning and so much time. And I know that coaches sometimes can get frustrated with that because, they feel like, man, I'm putting so much time. Is there a reward at the end? Like, where am I going from here? And I think, at least for me, the reward at the end was that I had an opportunity to work even more. because I really love what I do. And, but going through the pain of that at the same time as, you're training with the team 2-3 times a week at the time. And then you're going to tournaments, and when you go into tournament, and then you get ranked by Got Soccer. And then according to where you're ranked, if you can get into a platinum tournament, into the top bracket, the bottom bracket, you're disappointed with that. You want to complain to someone, all the pains of youth soccer are really, really difficult for coaches. And I think the guys that can stick with it for a long time, I think they become really, really good coaches, as long as they don't get stale. The important part about youth coaching is not getting stale, not recognizing that you have 2 or 3 sessions that you really like and you just do those and apply them to everything. You have to continuously try to think out of the box. How do you make that better? How do you make it different? And sometimes you make it different and it doesn't work. Right. And how many people I'm sure that are listening are thinking, yeah, I put this session together and in the middle of it, I realized I have to move the cones. I have to make it bigger, or I have to make it smaller. That happens to everyone. That happens to me and the pros. You make a session, you put a session together, and you're like, oh, this is going to work, because you're literally inventing training sessions. It's not like you're copying. Everyone else that you watch is for reference on what you can do according to the way you think. So you're constantly with your staff. I have a staff now, which is great. Youth soccer, I didn't have a staff, but I have a staff, and you're inventing stuff. Okay, we need to accomplish this for the team. How do we put a session that accomplishes that? And so it doesn't necessarily have to come from somewhere else, or a book, or your own training sessions that you have. That comes from just you making up what you need at that moment. And I think that's really important, to always be opening to getting better and to changing things and not getting stale. I think that's what makes you better and what makes your team better. Go ahead.
Sorry, would you agree, just touching on that, Tab, would you agree that, you talked about coaching licenses and it needing to be yours? In my experience, and I'm interested if you agree, players, if it's not yours and you don't believe in it or you don't own it, then players can kind of see through that. It has to be something, it can't be someone else's session that you're just ripping off. It has to be their session that makes sense for you, like you said, and for your group, so that there's a believability factor there, that players know you own it and you believe in it, and then they buy into that. Would you agree that you see that?
Yeah, but here's the challenge, right? Because players will believe, even if you have a poor training session, if you believe in your poor training session, the players will believe you. If you believe, but you have to believe, you have to believe that there's a reason to what you're doing, even if it doesn't look great. The problem, obviously, in youth soccer is that, you have parents on the sideline, and to a certain extent, and someone can lie and say this is not true, but it totally is true. The way you set up your cones, the way you set up your corner flags, the way you set up the look of your training session has to somewhat be appealing to parents for them to buy in that you're a good coach. And that's a difficult thing to do, because sometimes it doesn't apply. Sometimes making things really simple is what works for you on that day. But I know that coaches feel the guilt sometimes when they go on the field to say, my setup looked it almost looks like I don't know what I'm doing because it's too simple. And if you have more cones, it looks like I know what I'm doing more. And you have to, and it's inevitable. That is inevitable. So you kind of have to walk that middle line of doing the right thing and exactly what your team needs and as simple as possible, and making it look in such a way that it looks obviously very organized and it looks sort of appealing to the people watching, because at the end of the day, the parents want to make sure that they're with someone that they believe is really organized and is doing things the proper way. So you're trying to walk a little bit of both.
Right. Makes sense. I agree. So talk us through, I guess, then you're kind of into your pro license and some of the things that you experienced in the pro license and how that changed things and your outlook.
Yeah. And so then, obviously from the A license, I get to a point where, now I'm getting a few opportunities. I'm trying to talk to coaches all the time. Wilmer Cabrera, who happened to be the last coach here, who's a good friend of mine, invited me to go with the U17s at Bradenton. I spent a couple of weeks with him, helping him work with the team and just doing whatever he needed, whether set up cones or whatever, because I was on my way up. This is around 2008, 2009. So I did that. I went to Bradenton. And then after that, ran into Thomas Rungan, who was coaching the U20s at the time. And he said to me, "Hey, Tab, what have you been up to?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm taking all my licenses. I love this." And you can kind of see my energy. I really do love this, it kind of comes through when I talk to other people about coaching. And he said, "Hey, why don't you come and, just talk to the players, you can talk to them about your playing experiences and what you're doing now and the whole thing." But yeah, I had that unique aspect that I hadn't been retired for so long that I could relate to players, and I was in their shoes, and I had played for the youth national team, and so that's valuable at that point, especially with the national teams. The players want to know at times that you have a certain credibility, so that helps, when you say something. And so I went with the U20s a few times, obviously on per diem, and he brought me in and out where he could. There was times where he wanted to bring me in, but U.S. Soccer, said they didn't have the budget to pay for my ticket. So I would ask Thomas, "Hey, Thomas, if you want me there, I'll pay for my own ticket and I'll go," So I would go and pay myself to be part of it. And I continued that. And then in 2011, unfortunately, Thomas Rungan and the U20s didn't qualify to the World Cup. And U.S. Soccer called me to take the team on a trip to France because they fired Thomas, and there was one more trip remaining in that cycle, and they called me to do it. And immediately I thought, well, Thomas brought me in, so the last thing I can do is take the team. It looks bad. It looks like I've been waiting around to take his job. So I told U.S. Soccer I'm not doing it. And they asked me why, and they said, and I said, well, Thomas Rungan is the coach. He brought me in, so when he leaves, I'm leaving with him. Although I was not employed by U.S. Soccer, I was just per diem. I felt like it was the right thing. And U.S. Soccer told me, like, well, we spoke to Thomas Rungan, and he said that you should take the team. So I was like, oh, well, I said, that's nice. I said, but I can't answer that. Let me call Thomas. I got to call him myself and find out myself. So I called Thomas, and I go, Thomas, this happened. And he said to me, Tab, take the team. It's a great opportunity. You should do it. You should do it. You're going to do great. And at that point, I was like, wow, that's great. So I took it. And then later on that year, the job opened up, and I interviewed like everybody else. And it took a while, like a month. Initially, U.S. Soccer gave me the U18s because they thought that would be a better place for me to start. And then there was a change when Jurgen came in. Jurgen brought me in to help him with the first team, with the senior national team. And he actually told U.S. Soccer that he wanted me at the under-20s because he thought I was ready. And so he gave me the opportunity to be right at the under-20s. That's kind of how I started. So then now I'm with the under-20s, and I'm also helping, Jurgen with the senior national team. So that started in 2011. So I'm doing both as I'm going through. The U20s was on a part-time basis. It wasn't a full-time job at the time. And the senior national team, I was just an assistant coach when Jurgen needed me. And so I did both. By 2013, the end of the first cycle, we fortunately qualified to the World Cup with the U20s. And U.S. Soccer, you offered me a new contract. And at the time, I thought, I'd probably get some opportunities maybe in the professional game, but I'd like to do this longer to keep learning. But I would do it if I could become the youth technical director. And that was my sort of what I told U.S. Soccer. I said, I'll stay with the under-20s for the next 4 years as long as I can become youth technical director, because I think I have a lot of value to bring to the table. I've been involved now with youth soccer all the way through. I had been on youth technical committees the whole time, where membership was there, like, U.S. youth soccer, U.S. club soccer. They were all at the table. And I had a lot of good experiences from talking to people. And learning about the different parts of the game and membership and what membership needs and what they want and their numbers. And, so I felt like I had a lot to bring to the table. And U.S. Soccer said, okay, we don't have a youth technical director at this point. Claudio Reyna had been youth technical director up until 2010 or not, a while back, like a couple of years back, and he left. And so, I took over, and it was great. It was great because immediately I implemented with U.S. Soccer adding extra national teams, which I'll talk about later. So my pathway started to go, and because of coaching the U20s and being an assistant with the senior national team, I had an option to qualify to get into the pro license, and I took the pro license, and the pro license was amazing because now it was really pro license was really all us. It was all, they would give you assignments, and, it took about a year and a half. to complete. They would give you assignments. We would go there for a week, present things. They would have speakers come in. And then they would come to our environment, watch us work, watch our relationships with, with the medical staff, with your assistant coaches, watch your planning, how you plan Saturday's game and how your sessions, sort of match your planning to the game and the opponent. And I thought the pro license was excellent. And so I got to present there, and then I obviously, passed the pro license. And so I've gone, that's my full pathway. I got my pro license in 2017. So it was really 17 years of coaching pathway, really 18 years of coaching. So it's been a long time for me to get here.
And I think important for people to see that too, that it is a process. I think sometimes we think about coaching education as like check boxes, like I did it, I'm on to the next, I did it, I'm on to the next. And people see those windows in between where they have to wait a year as time that they're wasting, but it's really a development time. And obviously over time, yours was stretched out 5 years between your B and your A, and an opportunity to develop during that time, and then another 10 years to your pro. So you're constantly in between finding ways to supplement, but it is a development time period, which is really unique.
Yeah, and so in there on the slide, you can see from 2011 to 2019, I took advantage of being with the youth national teams of U.S. soccer to visit all these different academies and clubs around the world and see how they work and what they do and their relationship with people, which I think is the most important thing, how you relate to your staff and the people that work, not necessarily for you, but with you. And it was great. I had some great experiences through those years. And that's the time that you're talking about, the time in between, which obviously for me between 2011 and 2019 now becomes more fun because right. I just lived the traveling to Phoenix President's Cup and how difficult that is, and getting into the top bracket and winning games, and how you think you're not getting a fair shake when you're in a certain group, or, like all those things. And now it starts to get a little clearer when you're dealing with like some serious people who know so much more than you do about the game. But that's all time you have to put in for sure.
Based on that, and just kind of one of the questions that we had from coaches prior to recording this is kind of a two-part question, and this kind of wrap up our coaching education portion here is, what are your thoughts on the changes in coaching education in the United States since you began in 2001 to where we stand in 2020? I mean, there's obviously been a complete overhaul and revamp. And then how does that compare to the rest of the world from the experiences like you talked about and that you had between 2011 and 2019, observing other countries, kind of how we're training coaches here versus how other countries are doing that in their coaching education?
I think our licensing program now is comparable to some of the best ones in the world. I think U.S. Soccer has done a good job with that in terms of putting resources into coaching education. That's really been their focus for the last 5 or 6 years. And the coaching education is excellent. Now it's obviously really expensive now, which is difficult because the average coach is going to think, oh, man, I got to spend all that money, and how do I get that back? Right. And that's difficult. And I think, there's always, it's almost like going to college, right? I graduated from college. Maybe I didn't need to because I haven't actually used my college education, but the way that it's worked for me is, this is one thing my father used to tell me is, no matter what you do, like, your education is the one thing that stays with you forever. And so if you're becoming a better coach, if you're spending time and money in your own, if you can afford to do it, it's your own coaching education. No one can take that from you. And knowing is always an advantage over someone else. And so that's how I feel about it, about the coaching education. I think it's very good.
Awesome. Moving on and talking about, you've touched on a lot of this, but just kind of giving some background to your time in youth soccer and development, and obviously the different levels that you worked at. And, if you want to kind of briefly talk about it, and then we have a few questions on this, and we have 3 questions from people asking about your time as a youth soccer coach and kind of tying that in.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll start with the U8 through U10 period, because it was a discovery time for me. I ran into a coach in in some place, one of the seminars or something like that. Xavier Escargorta is his name, and he coached Bolivia in the World Cup. He coached Chile national team. He coached Valencia, Athletic Bilbao. He's a big time Spanish coach. And he said to me, wow, if you're just retiring from playing, you really don't know anything about the game. And to learn about the game, you have to teach it from the youngest level possible. That's how you learn. And I kind of took his words, and I thought, yeah, it would be easy to go to U19s or U18s and just kind of put a system together and say, guys, we're going to play 4-4-2. This is, you play here, you play there. But when you have to go to U8, it's more difficult, and it was discovery time for me. So I was on my knees, throwing the ball, telling the players to hit with the inside of the foot, hit with the instep, like teaching little things like that. And then I grew a little bit to the point where now I wouldn't allow the players to kick the ball out of the field. So we would play games, and whether the ball was inside our box or wherever it was on the field, they were not allowed to kick the ball out of bounds. So they had to figure out a way to get out of it, either by dribbling or passing, but they were not allowed to kick the ball out of bounds. And so implementing little things where you're forcing players to make different decisions, and like that, I made probably a couple of decisions that somebody would think, oh, why would you do that? Your team's going to lose, or you're going to risk losing, or, and by the way, I wanted our guys to win all the games like I always do, because winning is part of it. But if you do it the right way, you believe in it. And that was one of those things where I hadn't seen it anywhere. I just believed in it. I'm like, well, if the kids, if the ball goes down the line and you're chasing a forward down and you kick the ball straight out of bounds, what do you really get out of that? You can do that anytime. You can do that, So now I'm forcing you to not kick it out of bounds. Now you got to protect the ball. Now you got to figure out either you play it to the goalkeeper or you dribble outside by protecting it. So you're developing other aspects of the game. And so I thought, I'm going to do it. Why now? What do we have to lose here? We're U8, U9, like U10. So that's, I would implement things like that, but it was a discovery period for me because some of the things I tried maybe didn't work, but I would try.
And that's part of giving those players that confidence to do that. The fact that you were willing to say, we're going to make mistakes, we're going to lose the ball here, or we're going to concede goals, and that's okay. Like we're going to still want to win, but we're going to learn how to play the right way. We're going to learn how to make decisions on the ball and put ourselves in difficult situations. It's kind of part of that challenge at that age.
Right. That's what I wanted them to play. I wanted them to get different situations in the game. And sometimes they complicated them, but, and a lot of the time you can imagine when you talk about 8 and 9 years old, next thing you know, it's almost like you have time on the ball. And next thing you know, it's like somebody turns the light out, like you got 5 guys on top of you. And now you're just kicking the ball away. And in the time, that's okay. You have to do that. But if the thought initially was the right one to try to play out of it, then I was like, okay, all right, we're doing the right thing. And, we took a few hits for sure. And I was not the head coach, by the way. I was the assistant coach, but obviously the head coach didn't really know anything about soccer. It was just a nice guy helping out. So
right.
That's how that went. Go ahead.
Sorry, based on that and kind of how the methodologies change, with play in those younger age groups compared to what was going on in 2001 to 2003, kind of the things you're talking about are things that have become more commonplace, I think, today, and how people want players at that age to learn how to play. And how do you think the methodology has changed and the impact that's having on players that are being developed in this country, as far as how we run training sessions with a focus on players playing the game or something that looks like the game, and them having a ball at their feet more consistently maybe than they did at that age? Not necessarily with your teams, but with teams at that age, elsewhere. What's your thoughts on the change in the methodology? That was one of the questions that came in from when you first started in 2001.
Yeah, I really like it because a lot of the new methodology leans towards, what Manfred Schellscheid, one of my coaches that I had growing up, says all the time still now, which is the game is the best teacher. And so it's really providing an environment for the players to play. So of course you teach, of course there's times for certain exercises that help you, but how do you do that through an actual game? And that's sort of the methodology now, which I really like, because you're right. Back then it was all about coaches, and now you're a coach if guys can be in a line and they can do this and they can cross the ball this way. And now it's more about implementing the game into your exercises, or maybe putting your exercises into the actual game, and how do you make that work? So I like it a lot better.
Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about your time in the DA and your thoughts on that. We definitely have questions on the Development Academy, and obviously that's a hot topic right now. So I'd be interested to get some of your feedback on that.
Yeah. So, after I became a head coach for the first time at U11, So U11 was the first time in New Jersey at the time. U11 was full field. So you go right to full field at U11. And so I put, I guess a lot of the other parents from the area had seen our team play from our town, and they saw that we were always trying to play. So they brought like some of the best players to our team. So we put together a nice little team that ended up being successful and going to all the tournaments and all that. And, traveling all around the craziness of all the traveling around the country and winning state cups. And I was saying before about being ranked with this, like a parent will come up to me and go, hey, we're ranked number 2 in the country and got soccer. We're like, oh yeah, that's great. I don't even know how you determine that, but they would do it. And then, just sort of moving up through it. And then all the way up, I spent at least a year in each age group. So I did U11, I did U12, I did U13, I did U14. We, as a team, we had won the regionals at the time. Before the DA, there was the regional tournament, and then you could go for the national championship. So we won the national championship in 2008, which is, I think, the first year that the academy started. The following year, since we had won the national championship, we had good players, we got into the development academy. And so I started coaching in the academy, and I coached the 16, 17 age group in the academy for a couple of years at the same time as I coached the U15 pre-academy team. So I was doing both. And then I assisted on the U18. So I spent quite a few years in the development academy. But now the development academy I think it was in general good for soccer because it sort of forced everybody to think along the lines that you were talking about before, where you said, about the ratio of training to games. Where before we had it backwards. You would train twice and then you would have a tournament with 5 games on the weekend. And now you changed it to, hey, you have to train 3 to 5 times a week, and then hopefully play 1 or 2 games on the weekend, and lower the game load, and then up the practice load, which is your contact with the ball all the time. So a lot of those things. Now they required licenses to coach, and so it wasn't enough for someone with an F license to be obviously in the development academy, which means if someone has a B license or even a C license. If someone has gone through the pathway to get to a C license, they've done their homework, because it's not easy to get to a C license. For me, obviously, having played before, I jumped from the F to the B. But I do realize that after the F, there's the E and then the D and then the C. There's a lot of work in between there and a lot of years of work. So someone who has a C license is more prepared. And I think I like that about the academy, that now it took into account coaches that had put in the time. So you knew when you were coaching a game, you were coaching against a qualified coach, even if they were a C licensed coach, because that requires the time. So that was important. And, the training was good. And the games now were, although the competition was not great because it seemed like the players were, I felt like in the development academy, there wasn't such a competitive spirit like you had outside the development academy. Outside the development academy, I felt like there was more buy-in from the players about fighting for their club. And once you became part of the development academy, it was almost like everybody's on the same team, which is a little bit strange. But it was a different way. And, from all the different changes, it's not easy to change a whole country. So when the development academy was created, obviously I wasn't there, but the idea was great because it did change the thinking in general. And of course, as you go along, there are things that you figure out, hey, this doesn't work, like maybe taking high school away from all the kids. Do you really need to do that? Is that really necessary for everybody? Some of the great players, maybe they don't want to play high school, so they don't. But maybe some of the other ones, the social aspect of competition with your school against another school, maybe that's a good thing, And so there's some things that you can look back and say, well, maybe when they thought of this, maybe it wasn't great. But there was a lot of good with it. And so I spent, unfortunately by 2013, I had to stop coaching in the development academy because now my U20 job became a full-time job. Soccer decided, well, now you're a U20 coach full-time and, technical director full-time. So you can't do anything outside of here. So then I focused my time on coaching the national team.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because you touched on it there, and I think you kind of answered the question. One of the questions is about the impact that youth development has had, that the Development Academy has had on youth development. And I think in the past couple of weeks, obviously with all that's happened and the decision by U.S. Soccer and maybe the steps from MLS to pick up that and USYS and what that will look like is obviously unknown. I think sometimes we've lost track of what has happened with the Development Academy in the last 12 years and the positives that it had, like you said, with requirements of coaching education and the ratio of training to playing and just the professional environment that it has created. And I think it's challenged and raised the game for everybody. And that probably shouldn't be missed in what is the uncertainty of this current moment, that we're starting that next chapter from a different place than we were 12 years ago. We're not going all the way back to restart. And I think that's really valuable. I think you touched upon that for sure.
Yeah, no question. It definitely moved the needle. That's for sure. And that's important. And when those decisions were made, I think the people sitting in the room at the time made some big, important decisions. And I think they helped.
One question based on that came in, and I think this is a hot topic issue, and I've listened to so many conversations about this, and it's a long topic, and I'm interested in your opinion on it. The question was, do you believe there's a case for lowering costs, time expenditure, and stress to players that are maybe not at the highest level, and trying to find ways to regionalize competition across the country or include high school, like you referred to, those kind of things? I know you talked about the travel of being a club coach and all that went into that. And as a parent myself and coach, I've seen that and experienced that. So what are your thoughts on that within this country and this massive landscape, obviously, that we have?
Well, I mean, here's the issue, because you always hear the pay to play has to go away, and the fact is it will never go away because it can't go away. I mean, someone, when you're a youth club, unless you have an owner that's willing to just throw money at the club, basically not throw money away, but to donate money to the club, someone has to pay. I mean, you're asking, we're sitting here talking about coaches, right? And the effort that the coaches make to get their licenses. Well, those coaches need to be paid, and they need to be paid properly because they're putting time into their coaching education. And who pays for that? So the club can't pay for that. Inevitably, the parents have to pay for that. But I had when my daughter was a little bit younger, she did horseback riding, right? And if we didn't pay, she didn't get a horse. It's not, it was pay to play horseback riding. You need a horse, you're going to get on it. We're going to teach you about horseback riding. You have to pay for that. And you can't be upset with that. I mean, somebody's teaching you, when your kids go to piano, you pay for the lessons. And when you come to soccer, you have to pay for soccer. I mean, there's no other, I mean, could there be a way to reduce costs? I mean, that's just such a huge question because you have to take one club at a time and the goals of the club. Can you limit the travel? You could absolutely limit the travel, but that's up to each individual team and club, really. Why should you, if you can do fundraising amongst your team and your fundraising allows you to go to Southern California for a tournament or Virginia for a tournament, why would you not go and see different competition? You should do it. If you can afford to do it, you should do it. I don't think it's mandated to travel to across the country anywhere. So I don't think there's a lot wrong with youth soccer, to be honest. And I know maybe people will jump on me when it comes to that, but I had, other than the difficulties of sometimes making parents understand what the team is about, I had a blast coaching youth soccer, and it was not easy. It was a lot of work, but it was great. All those experiences of traveling are experiences that they'll stay with the kids forever. But for me, there's no way to reduce costs or to change the competition to become more regionalized, because you can do that anyway, and the team can still travel if they want to. So what do we need to change? I'm not sure what needs to change there.
Gotcha. No, I think there's an argument, and it is interesting in the discussion, and and I think personally, my personal viewpoint, to put it out there, is it's a parental decision, right? It's where is my player in that situation? Is it about the experience? Is it, what am I looking to get out of this? Am I looking for my player to have physical activity, or am I looking for them to progress, or am I looking for them to have an experience where they meet other people or have different experiences? And that's all in the balance and the way up, and that's where the parent has to make that decision. So awesome. Well, moving on and talking a little bit about your time with the youth national teams and the men's national team. If you want to touch base on some of this stuff, and we have a few questions that are on this as well.
Okay, so obviously I started with the under-20s in 2011. It had been a team that had not qualified to the previous U20 World Cup, which is obviously, at the time, it was a pretty big hit for U.S. soccer. Now obviously we've had two Olympic teams not qualify. We've had the senior national team not qualified. So it's kind of become maybe a little bit more of a commonplace to have a team not qualified to World Cup. But in 2011, our senior team had qualified to so many tournaments in a row. Our youth teams are qualifying all the time. So it was kind of like it was a little bit, Olympic team the same. So it was quite a hit in 2011. And so I took over the team, and I felt like, although it was my first, I want to call it first important job, I felt like a little bit of pressure to get our team to the World Cup. Unfortunately, we did it. We were not a physically talented team in 2011. That was the 93, 94 age group, but we were a technically gifted team. And so we had the ball out. We pressed fairly well to win the ball back, so we didn't get too much into transition games. And we did fairly well. We qualified to the World Cup, and then made it to the final of CONCACAF, lost to Mexico. The tournament was in Mexico. We lost to Mexico 3-1 in overtime. And we could have, to be honest, won the championship. There was a penalty not called for us with about 5 minutes left in a 1-1 game. We could have won, but that's the way it went. And then we went to the World Cup, and that's where it kind of hit us, that transition game of us physically not being, at the level. It really got us, and we didn't have a good World Cup. We lost the first game to Spain 4-1, even though we pressed them really well. They eventually, opened the game on the counter. We tied France in our second game, that was a France with Pogba and Kondobia, and that team won that World Cup. But we tied 1-1, and actually Luis Gil missed a penalty that game, so we could have won that game, which would have helped us. And then the third game, we had to win by a number of goals, and Ghana had to win by a number of goals, and they beat us like 3 or 4-1 the last game. So they beat us, and we got knocked out. But it was a good experience. It was a good experience for me as a coach. It was a good experience for the boys because they got to compete in the World Cup. They didn't miss out. They got to go to the final of CONCACAF, so it was a good experience. And then going into the next group, now the goals were a little bit higher. So I already told that next group, hey, we're together here to win CONCACAF. We're not here to qualify to the World Cup. Qualifying is like, now we take it for granted. We're doing. We want to win CONCACAF. It's never been done before. We have to be champions. We didn't win it. We had a good run in CONCACAF. That was a group with, Texas is Emerson Hyndman. But then we had a bunch of other great players there, Matt Miazga and Paul Arriola and Tommy Thompson, and I can name them all. But we had great players there too, and we made it all the way to the quarterfinals of the World Cup. Lost to Serbia on penalties in the quarterfinals. Serbia went on to win the World Cup that year. So we had a pretty good run. We were a little disappointed to lose that game because we could have won it. I don't say that we were the better team, but it was really like a 50-50 game. It was a close game that either team could have won, and unfortunately we didn't win, and we lost on penalties. But it was a great run. And then we go to the next cycle. That was the 2017 team, and now we had guys like Eric Palmer Brown and Carter Vickers, and now guys that have moved on to the national team as of more recently. Tyler Adams was on that team. It was really good team. And we also we go to CONCACAF the same way. We got to win the first CONCACAF ever. It's never been won. We have to do it. Again, it's not about qualifying to the World Cup. We're going to do that, but we have to be champions of CONCACAF. We have to be, and we did it. So we beat Mexico in the round leading into the final. So Mexico didn't even make it to the final because we beat them beforehand. It was the first time a US U20 team beating Mexico in 30 years. So we did it. We knocked them out. We went to the final. We won the final against Honduras on penalties. But we were champions for the first time. And so I felt like now, after being at U.S. Soccer, 5-6 years, now we're starting to do things that haven't been done before. And I think we're raising the bar, and that was great. I was really happy about that. And now comes the next cycle going into 2019, which was the last one. And then that last one, obviously now we have Tim Weah, we have Conrad De La Fuente, we have Sebastian Soto and Richie Ledesma and Alex Mendez, and you could go on and on. So many guys, Chris Richards, who played here in the Houston area. So anyway, so we, a lot of good players, and now we go to CONCACAF, and now we have the difficult assignment of repeating, because now we're champions already. So now the seller is like, okay, let's forget qualifying to the World Cup because we're going to do it. But now we have to win the championship. This is what we do now. And it's always more difficult being the champion and to try to repeat than it is to win it for the first time when people kind of don't expect it. And we repeated. And to be fair, we pretty much destroyed everybody. We were the better team every game, hands down. We all the way through to the final, we were the best team every single game. And even in our game that we had to qualify to the World Cup against Costa Rica, we won 4-0. That was not even a game. And in the final against Mexico, we beat Mexico 2-0. And it was a good game with Mexico, but we were clearly the better team. So I felt like at the time, now that ends the full youth national team coaching, and I feel like, okay, I think it's time for me, it's time to do something else. But it was I love the 8 years there. I loved all the boys that I got to coach. I feel lucky that I've had so many great players that I've coached and who have gone on to great things and who will be great for the next 10 years. So it was really fun doing that.
During that time while you were there, did you see, and this kind of ties, I guess, into the development academy, did you see kind of an overall improvement of players? I mean, obviously there's some great players, even going back to the first teams there with DeAndre Yedlin and people like that. But as you went further along, was maybe the size of the group of players and the pool of players improved based on what was going on with the development academy and some of the things that were going on within the country, just the standard raising every year upon year?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because I made it sound like we won because of me, and that wasn't the case. The case was that you're exactly right. The market changed, and the players now were more professional. The players knew how to train properly and how to make the efforts at the right time, and they came in with different physical skills. Because now we take it for granted that you can go into any field in Texas and find creative players, because you can. You can go into any field and see the little creative guys who can pass ball here, But now those kids are starting to develop that physical ability to cover ground in transition. And that's what's really important. And we started to see it around 2015, 2016. Because now, when I started with the youth national teams, it was picking skillful players. Where can we find them? How do we? And now we're past that, to be honest. We have skillful players. And we have now players that are developing into those transition players. That's really important. And that's a great point, because the teams just got better. The players got better. And that's why we got better. All I did with them is give them the wings to be winners. Like, we accept nothing but winning at the top level, because we don't care what's been done before. We care that now it's different. And I think the players sort of, bought into that, but it was certainly them. They were better.
One of the other things that I think is kind of a common conversation and debate within the country is we obviously have these different styles of play all across the country, and you go from state to state and you see different types of players and different types of games and value in certain types of players, and obviously a melting pot of cultures from all over the world coming together, and you hear this argument that that's the challenge, is that the players are coming from different backgrounds and different cultures, and you're trying to mold that all together. Personally, I feel like that should be a strength that we can tie upon. But was that a challenge when you were with the national team to bring players together that came from different either cultural backgrounds or different playing style backgrounds, depending on where they were growing up within such a vast landscape?
No, I agree with you that it's a strength. What you get when you get players from Michigan. You know what you get when you get a player from Texas. You know what you get when you get a player from Southern California or New Jersey. And by saying what you get is you get normally a certain skill set with a player from Texas or Southern California, right? Yeah. You get a certain mental aspect of the game when you get a player from Michigan or New Jersey, for example. Yeah. And those are all good parts of blending a team. It's not different in Spain. If you get a player from Bilbao, from Basque Country, and you get you have a strong mindset of a player that's going to be hard a player that's not going to break down no matter what. If you get a player from Seville, Andalusia area in southern Spain, you're likely going to get a happy, skillful player who's going to make things happen. And inevitably, you can't build a full team of players from Seville, just like it's difficult to build a full team from Bilbao and have I'm not saying you couldn't do either one. You can, and you can be successful with both. Brazil can do it with happy players. Germany can do it with players that are more structured, although the German game has changed, right?
Yeah.
So it can be done before. I'm saying in general, because I don't want to be held to certain words, but I think it's a strength to be able to pick players with different skill sets.
I think that's awesome to hear, and I think that's accurate, and I think that's a strength that we can definitely play on as we move forward as a country. Kind of moving on, just your time as a national team assistant coach and that experience in the World Cup, if you have an opportunity to kind of touch upon that and what that was like and those experiences being around that environment.
It was so amazing because I felt like as a player, I really didn't enjoy it that much. I just kind of played, and I felt like, going to the World Cups is like, okay, this is what I'm doing. That's what I do, And when I became a coach, and especially being Jurgen's assistant was amazing because the doors were open to us everywhere in the world. Everyone knows Jurgen all over the world, and that was great access to have. And it was the way we were received everywhere we went when Jurgen was the head coach. That was really special. And then being at the 2014 World Cup in Brazil with him was just great. I remember, setting up the fields because obviously I was, one of the assistant coaches. So I would come out and we would set up all the cones for the players to come in and do I ran all of the possessions before the game, the shooting on goal before the game and all that stuff. And I remember just coming out and setting up the field, take a game like the Belgium game, for example, that we lost, but just coming to the stadium, seeing the atmosphere, the people, the perfect pitch, the field was perfect. Like everything is perfect. And just thinking at the time, I'm like, I love coaching so much. I have to keep going here because this is just a great feeling to be part of that. And, and having the opportunity to be there every day with guys like, Clint Dempsey and Josie and Michael Bradley and Jermaine Jones, all different personalities that you had to get to work together, being able to be an assistant coach in a situation where now you have all great players there, right? And so you're building the team to play. Inevitably, the guys that don't play aren't all that happy all the time, just like on any team. And me being the assistant coach that had to run the sessions for the guys that didn't play a lot of the times, that was not easy. I learned a lot. About having, guys like, whether it was Kyle Beckerman or, all great players, by the way, who now are not playing, right? And keeping them going and saying, hey, what, this is about you. You got to be ready because if the moment comes, and just those little things with those big players who were all great people, by the way, but it was great learning experience for me as an assistant. And I'm glad I had a chance to live that as an assistant coach, because sometimes when you jump to being head coach of stuff, you take a lot for granted. And I think I learned that part of it where now as a head coach, I feel I can do better. I can understand my assistant coach when they have to go out and set up the field and I'm sitting in the office answering phone calls about a press conference that I have later that day. I know what's going on. So it's a lot.
Of all those experiences with the national team setup and things like that, what was your most memorable experience, would you say? That was one of the questions we had come in.
Of all
the time there, what was your most memorable experience of all that time with the youth team and the senior team? Is there any one moment that sticks out from all those times?
I mean, I would have to say that, it's hard to be, even though I was a head coach with the youth national teams and winning the two CONCACAF championships was great, because I know that it was great for our country since it hadn't been done before. But I think being assistant coach, but being at the World Cup in Brazil 2014, even as an assistant coach, I think that's the greatest moment. I think, we had a chance to play. Don't forget, we had a really tough group. Even though we made it to second round, we played Germany, who ended up being the champion and, destroying, Brazil. We lost to them 1-0 and got criticized for that. we tied Ronaldo. Don't forget, we coached against Ronaldo, and we also coached against Ghana the first game. And I was the one providing the reports to the team. So I did all the scouting reports to the team. So, obviously when you have to present to the senior national team about what Ronaldo does, it's not everybody in the world kind of knows, but now you're looking from a different way. Now he's just a player that you have to prepare for. It's not, okay, it's Ronaldo. No, now he's good, right? Just like other teams have good players too, and you have to prepare a certain way. So I think just the whole experience of participating at the 2014 World Cup is for me the best experience.
Moving on to your time as a technical director, and if you could just kind of spend just a second maybe to explain kind of what that role involved. I know you touched on it earlier, and what you did while you were in that role and the effects that you had upon youth soccer. I think that people would like to hear about that.
Yeah, I think I learned a lot from, attending all the meetings with the membership, learning about U.S. youth soccer and U.S. club soccer and all these other, membership groups that are kind of fighting against each other a lot of the time. That, that's difficult, because that, if anything needs to change, is the fact that it's tough with everybody fighting against each other at the top, U.S. club soccer kind of sort of came on the side and started putting all these competitions together without, I feel, the regard of what was already happening, where this should have been sort of I know that it's a for-profit business, so it's difficult to navigate that when you're sitting in the room and you know that not everyone's interest is at the same place, but that's kind of how it works. So that was difficult, but I learned a lot because I know kind of where everybody stands. And I know sort of what membership wants, but I know what they really want, not what they say they want. And so that all those things became important, because now I'm navigating the soccer world saying things that I know have to sort of ease the different sides, and that's kind of difficult, but I learned a lot. So that was important. I added, from a youth national team standpoint, I added national teams. So, when I took over, we didn't have a U16 and U19 national team, and I felt they were important for the pyramid of what we do, because as you know, the youth national teams go every 2 years. So you have a 2-year cycle. So if you have your U15, U17, U19s are even born years for the boys, right? For the girls, it's the opposite for the boys. But and your U16, 18, 20 are odd years, birth years. And so by not having a U16, you actually didn't see a player. If they didn't make the U17 national team play in a year up, you wouldn't see a player for so many years. So we gave them the national teams 2 more years of development, of commitment, international commitment. And with the 19s, the same. Our U17 players, the best ones make the U20 national team next, 1 year up. But the ones who are not best, let's say the next, because only the best ones may be 6 or 7. So the next group of whatever that pool is of 30 players actually didn't have any international competition anymore. They were finished, basically. So by giving them U19s, you give them 2 more years, and now they stay in the loop for the next Olympic team. So I felt they were really important. So we added those age groups. So Neil, granted me, I presented why we needed them, and they granted those. So that was nice. Although at first they granted them without a paying coach. So we had to hire, per diem, and then we were able to get coaches, which was difficult, but we were making strides a little bit at a time. So that was that part of it. And then I was able to bring in people that I thought were amazing. I wanted, for me, the perfect youth national team coach was someone who had gone through the whole coaching process, right? All the coaching licenses, who had put in a lot of time into coaching, either youth or in an academy, but who had also played for the national team, if possible. To me, that was sort of the perfect coach, because the players could relate, because that coach had been in their shoes, and that's better than not. Now, I'm not saying that I would take a bad coach who had played for the national team over a good coach who had not. So I'm taking 2 coaches who are the same. I'd like to take the guy who played for the national team. So I try to recruit along those lines, and I was able to bring some great people. Dave Vandenberg didn't play for the U.S. youth national team, but he played for Holland, and he played for the senior national team. So he was a good, he knew Texas soccer because he lived right in Dallas, and and I felt like he brought a lot to the table. Same with Hackworth, same with Sean Securis, or obviously Brad Friedel. You know, you can't say enough about him. So yeah, I brought that type of personality to the youth national team, which I think helped a lot.
So in that role, and I think that's really interesting, and you touched it, you know, the challenge. One of the questions we had was, what's the biggest challenge facing youth development in the United States? And I think you touched upon it, but, you know, what are your thoughts on the biggest challenges that we face in moving forward and continuing to improve in our development of players?
I think the biggest challenge is organizations fighting in their own direction. You know, not having the same goals. Sometimes pretending everybody has the same goals, but they don't. I think the biggest challenge is not with the youth players, is not with the clubs. I think the clubs, I know the pain of club soccer. The clubs are doing the best they can. I know that for a fact. I mean, there may be, of course, there's always exceptions to the rule, but clubs are doing the best they can. They're surviving. They're surviving. That's what, you know, club soccer is about. So whatever they're charging players is normally because that's what they need. And they're trying to, at the end of the day, you're trying to put the numbers together to survive for the following year. I know that for a fact. 99% of the clubs in the country are like this. So I think the issue where we need to do better is at the higher levels in the boardrooms. How do we work together a little bit better for youth development? I think that's where the change needs to be.
I think you're right. I've heard people say, you know, that player development is determined by clubs, but I agree that at a level when we start dividing the talent into different leagues and different groups, and we're sectioning it off where they can't play against each other, then that's creating a problem in the development, you know, structure. So I completely agree. What are your thoughts on, you know, where we are in youth development right now, and what do you think the future holds, you know, based on obviously the time you were with the U.S. soccer in that position, and what do you think the future holds as we move forward from that vantage point that you were able to see the whole country?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Asked probably at the wrong time, right? Because there's so much that can change now, you know, with the Development Academy going away and maybe MLS now taking over. We don't know what that's going to look like. We don't know what the effect of that is going to be on the rest of the marketplace. We don't know if, you know, U.S. club soccer, you know, pulling people away maybe from that elite player pathway on the boys' side is going to have a huge effect. I know that on the girls is different, so that's something else. That's a different challenge because on the girls' side, sort of, you know, U.S. club soccer with their ECNL has been the top competition, but it's not the same in the boys. So it's, you know, it's difficult to tell where we're going to go from here. I think it all starts with people having the right intentions. You know, and I'm not sure what the intentions are at the point, but once MLS lays out a plan and we see what that looks like, maybe at that point we can revisit what we think it's going to look like. What I do know for a fact is that players are getting better and better every year, and they're physically more prepared to compete internationally. So that part of it continues to move forward.
Awesome. Last question. I thought this was a really cool question because I think, you know, obviously I live in Houston, and this coach who presented this question lived in Houston. And if you live in that bubble, you know, sometimes you see what's going on and you think positive or negatives about the country, or about the city and the development. But, you know, prior to your arrival in Houston, obviously with the youth national teams and the technical director, you spent time in Houston and around. You know, what was your impression and your perception of youth development in Houston prior to arriving? And then maybe in the time that you've been here, if that's changed at all, you've been able to see, you know, confirmation of what you already believe.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I didn't know much about Houston soccer before I came here. There had been very few national team players that came out of the area. You know, so we normally at the national team level, we pay attention more in areas where most of the players come from because we only have so much time. And so you try to go mostly to the areas, focus in the areas that develop the most talent. And Houston was not one of those areas. And now that I live here, I realize that even calling Houston a little bubble, it's crazy because this is its own country. I mean, Houston is huge. And when I see like the effort, you know, that Houston Dynamo through Paul Holliker have made over the last, you know, let's say year and a half, in implementing all the alliances throughout the city, because this city is huge. Like I said, it's a country. And seeing what the potential is for the area of Houston to be a big time player in the country, in terms of player development. I mean, I'm really excited about that because it's amazing here. It's amazing the talent, just going and watching our academy now. And, I'm not shy to bring players up. I had a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old, and, excuse me. I had a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old, and an 18-year-old in our preseason this year. Not because I wanted to prove a point, but because I felt like they belonged there. And they did. And they did. I mean, you could not tell. If you're watching from the outside, you would not be able to tell that these guys didn't belong there. Now, none of them were the best player on the field, obviously, because they're young, but you couldn't tell that they weren't. And so I think there's a lot of future here.
Yeah, I agree. I think you look at it, I've lived here for a while now, and you look at, like you said, massive numbers. You've got a climate that's conducive to being able to play at all times of the year. You've got a culturally diverse city, perhaps only bested by New York as the most culturally diverse city in the country, the third largest population, and plenty of space and facilities for kids to play and learn. So yeah, the potential is untapped. I think at this point we're touching the iceberg maybe, and there's more to come. So I'm excited as well. Moving on just to the last one here, and this is your time with the Houston Dynamo. I know I haven't been here very long, and obviously started the season and then stopped because of the virus. But what's kind of been your takeaway so far from your time with the Dynamo and the role that you're playing there, and the differences maybe from things you've done in the past as in this new role?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot obviously to take into consideration with with the role. The first, what I'm most impressed with is with the quality of people that work at this club. And I wouldn't just be saying that because I don't have to say it at all, but we have 170 people working at this club. That's a lot of people, and everywhere you go, people have this sort of the same reaction. Everybody is bought in with the club. Everybody loves the club. I'm really excited about that because that's a culture. I have nothing to do with that. I feel like I just fit into the culture of what this club is about. And this is why I'm really happy to be here. I mean, we can always, as head coaches, it's easy to always complain about the players we don't have and what we can do better. Of course, we need to improve. Everybody needs to improve. Every team, every coach wants to improve their team. But I think the base of people who are here, I think it's an excellent base to work from. In terms of the responsibilities, I think I had maybe on the next slide or something with, if I can go through this one though. Yeah, on the next slide is where it gives more, maybe we can go backwards. Yeah, so some of the responsibilities of becoming the coach at the Houston Dynamo were obviously from building a staff. Obviously, I wanted to bring staff that number one, that I knew well, that I respected and trusted. And two, staff that had a lot of experience, and particularly professional experience, because I hadn't been a professional coach before. Although I felt like I was ready, I didn't, I felt like surrounding myself by people with experience would be better. So building the team was important. Then building the actual team. So when you come in, you have to make, immediately you have to start making decisions about who stays, who leaves, who comes in, who can you sign, who can you have to drop, what your salary budget is, and what movements you can make, who has an extension of their contract coming up that you have to think about, those type of things. You have to prepare for the college draft, which I'm not going to go into, but you can sort of imagine what that's about. And prepare for the expansion draft, what players you can protect, which ones you can't. We were lucky enough this year that a player was taken last year, so we didn't have to protect anyone this year. We didn't have to participate that way, but it's still, you keep track of who's available when that happens, because some people want to trade. Preparing the preseason schedule, that's something that you do with the medical group and with the high performance group, all of it, from the fitness coach to everyone else. And then developing a style of play, because you already, when you interview to become a coach, you already have your plans on how you want to play. And you get hired because the club thinks that the way you want to play is something that they want to see. And so you have to start implementing it now with the players that you have. And I felt that we had good players for that. The player profiles are important, so the players know specifically what's expected from them, not just positional by saying, okay, you're a right winger, you play there. No, but what does that mean? How do you want that to look like? Not only how many goals and assists, because that's the easy part, but or how many crosses in the box, but How many meters should a right winger run? How many passes forward should they make? How many balls into the box? How many, that type of thing for every single position, to have a proper profile with all those determining factors that you can actually measure. Because at the end of the day, your eyes measure more than anything. And you usually measure by numbers when your eyes are telling you something is wrong. That's usually the case.
Yeah.
But the numbers will usually help you to justify what your eyes are telling you, which your eyes to me are the most important part, right? So developing that, then having all the meetings with the players, getting to know personally and as a team and in small groups to develop the playing style. You need to do all of those. Dealing with the press conferences and all the obligations of being a professional coach. It's obviously, it's not easy because a lot of my attention during the week goes into my post, practice conferences or trainings are open basically every day to the press. So the last, I think it's hour or 45 minutes are open to the press so they can come in, all the issues that you have with the players, because each player is a different corporation. It's not just a person. A player has his agent, has his family, has a contract, they're a company. Each player is a company, and you have to deal with them like a person because you want to connect with them and their family, but also like a company because they're protecting a brand. Each player is a brand, so that's important. And and then all the club appearances that you have to make, that you have to prove for the players to make because they're important people. The players are important people. It's important for them to be in the community. It's maybe important for Albert or Miner or Boniek to have to go do an appearance in Honduras in the middle of the week. And so you have to figure out how you approve that, how they miss practice, so all those things come into effect as a coach. And then here's the part where I think the pro license helped me the most, which is having to deal with people above you, your GM and your president and your ownership. You have to have a relationship with your ownership. I speak with our owner on the phone as much as I can, explain to him what's going on, sometimes ask for things, so you have to know how to manage that. So that whole part of being the first team coach, now we put aside all of the stuff that we talked about with setting up the cones and, so now the assistant coaches are doing that because we already planned it. And now I'm sort of in a different place. Like when I walk onto the field's already set up, so it's a different place to look. But I understand the coach that set it up. I understand what they're thinking because I've been there, so it's kind of neat, but there's a lot to think about.
That is, and obviously the role changes, like you said, from being an assistant coach to being a head coach, because now maybe the setup and all that, is taken by someone else, and you're handling kind of a bigger picture on some element of how you manage the group, which obviously becomes a challenge.
Yeah, and it's the expectation. So now the Houston Dynamo, and Houston's been champion of the league twice. Like we're dealing with this is a champion club that maybe hasn't won the league in a while or hasn't made the playoffs in a while, but it's a champion club, and that's my obligation to take it back to being a champion club. I can't sit around and go, oh, if we had such and such player, we could win. My idea is to try to figure out how we can win now. Like it doesn't matter to me who's not here. What matters to me is who's here. We're going to do the best we can with who's here, and our goal is no other than to win the championship at the end of the year. That's what we want. And to do that, we have to get in the playoffs first. So it's sort of one step at a time.
How do you think your experience with youth development prior to this, and all the things we've talked about, how does that translate to your style and maybe your long-term plans with the Dynamo and how that integrates into the MLS level? Are there things that you think are going to have a profound effect upon, your approach to this new role?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly helpful. Where do I start? We could go backwards on all the stuff I learned from youth, from me understanding, for example, and I think not too many first team coaches maybe in MLS can relate to that, but I can understand what our U12 academy coach is thinking about.
Yeah.
I understand his challenges, and I care about it. I care about the challenge of the U12 coach because I know what that's like. And when I go and watch us doing, a skill session on a Sunday afternoon on my day off, and I go, Paul Holliker has someone doing something, I relate to the people and the parents who are there at the U9 session and what their dreams and goals are of their player and the pathway they have to take. So I think it's an incredible. Like my whole youth experience has been incredible for now. And then comes the obvious side, which is the actual teaching on the field of the players. Because although I have players who are 35, 36 years old, so Minor can tell you, if you talk to Minor can tell you that he'll go to practice and learn something. There's always something to learn. And so although I have older players, it doesn't change. Like of course, you treat them differently. There's things you take for granted, but the teaching doesn't stop. You still sometimes have to stop the session and tell the player, no, make the pass this way. Hit the ball with the inside of the foot to make that pass. And if you have to stop the session to say that, then you do that because that's a teaching moment that doesn't stop. So I think that's maybe where it helps a lot.
It's one question that was a little bit different, a little bit unique maybe here, but this obviously came from a goalkeeper coach. He asked, what do you look for in your goalkeepers and how do you use them in the game? And then also, to what extent and how do you involve them with your team during practice? I think that's obviously a common question from coaches, and this obviously is coming from a goalkeeper coach here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. We have the luxury here, obviously, that we have a goalkeeper coach full time, because we're a professional club. When you're with the youth, you try to figure out what am I doing with the goalkeeper? How do I bring them in? Or do we have most clubs have a goalkeeper trainer and then the goalkeeper comes over later, to train with the team. But here we have a goalkeeper coach, so they can be working on a number of things. How do I see the goalkeeper first? I want a goalkeeper that's confident. That's number one. That's, there's no negotiating there. There's no doubt in the goalkeeper. Goalkeeper's going to make mistakes. Goalkeeper's going to look bad. But at the end of the day, they have to have the confidence that, okay, I'm going to give up goals sometimes. I got to focus on the next play, right? The next thing is to really be engaged in the game because we're a high pressing team. And I like high pressing, which means that our line plays really high. So it's important for a goalkeeper to be prepared to be 10 yards outside of the box to help us with that at times. So that's what I look for. I like in general to have a goalkeeper that comes out on crosses. I don't like a goalkeeper that stays on the lines. Having said that, that's pretty much all I can say, because if I start to say about, hey, I like a goalkeeper that makes sure he sets his feet before the shot comes, that's more technical, and I like for the people who know what they're talking about to talk about that. And I really don't know about goalkeeping. But that's what I like. How do I include them in trainings? If we can include them in the 5v2s, for example, we throw them in there. If we do a possession game in which we go to end zones, sometimes instead of putting like a center forward there or a center back there to play back in, I'll call the goalkeepers in. Like we have it planned, but the goalkeepers will play in the end zone so that they can be the one in the free zone that the people play back to and they play back in. So I try to include them as much as I can in our practices.
Awesome. Last question for this, and I think this relates, you already touched on the idea of having 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds in your training, and obviously those of us that are in and around Houston know those players and are excited about those players. But, what is it that you look for in a younger player's development, not specifically theirs, but just over time? What is it that you're looking for in those younger players, and what indicates maybe that they're ready for that opportunity to train or even play with the first team that stands out even at that young age?
I mean, I think the number one thing is the ability to think fast. That's what really can put you on the field with professional players. If you think fast, then no player will be faster than the ball. So the fact that you're a little guy is not going to make a difference if you play quickly. So that's number one. Then having for me, that obviously, we're taking into context that you're talking about like a really good technical player because you need that, right? Especially in the position, So in the next thing for me is the mentality to be able to suffer, because it's, in order for you to grow, you have to be able to suffer. You have to be able to put yourself in situations you're not comfortable in, both on the technical side by doing things that you're not comfortable with, and in particular in the physical side.
Awesome. Well, Tab, thank you so much for spending all this time with us and gosh, more than an hour of us visiting. And really enjoyed it. And I know people are going to enjoy listening to it and find a lot of value in it. And I know personally, I'm excited about watching the Dynamo play and seeing some of these young players come through and watching them progress into the first team and represent Houston. I know that's a big thing for people in Houston. So that's awesome to see. Thank you so much, and we really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's a great opportunity for me in front of the, Texas youth, which I haven't been able to do. And hopefully we'll get more opportunities down the road.
Awesome. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thank you.